Every month these monsters come out and destroy entire cities. They have become so common that they have been given the name Kaiju. This Kaiju has caused devastating damage to the city of Kafka. The military had to intervene and try to stop them with Apache helicopters firing armor-piercing rounds. Unfortunately, it was no use. They even tried a barrage of rockets. By this point, they had no choice but to call in for the Special Ops Division. The commander dropped in front of the monster as bait while his soldiers flanked it in preparation of a finishing blow. They weakened the monster's hard shell through firing high-velocity ammunition and eventually eliminated it with a single blast from a railgun. Thereafter, they confirmed the elimination by checking its pulse. Following on, a cleanup squad sets up a large-scale forensic operation. Their job is to extract DNA samples and remove portions of the monsters to send to a lab for further study. After cleaning up, a man named Kafka, who was part of the cleanup crew, walks past someone familiar. The next day, Kafka is back at work, carving up the monster's remains and enjoying the fresh stench of magnesium. All of a sudden, one of his colleagues slips up and burns his knees by accident. Luckily, the paramedics were nearby to treat him. Kafka flies his drones back down and gets ready to go home. He finally gets to relax, but then he starts thinking about that girl he walked past during lunch break. He can't stop thinking about her, so he turns on his television. When he switches to the news channel, he sees the exact same girl that he was just thinking of. She stresses him out, so he puffs on a blunt and thinks of how he's going to rizz her up, but then realizes the loser that he is, and that he will be single forever. He quietly cries himself to sleep. In his sleep, he dreams about joining the special forces and marrying that pretty woman, but shortly after, he has to wake up for work and ride 30 miles there. Upon reaching his work destination, his boss introduces him to a new employee. This new guy's name is Ichikawa. The first thing he does is insult Kafka and humiliate him in front of the boys. Kafka gets mad but says nothing, because he knew he was a failure. Then they all get to work as if nothing happened. Their boss assigns roles to everyone and leaves the mighty Kafka to train Ichikawa. During lunch break, Kafka thinks about pranking Ichikawa by puking on him, but he realizes that Ichikawa was having a rough day, so instead he chooses to give him some food out of sympathy. He also offers him some nose plugs, which he politely declines. But Kafka forces him to take them out of tough love. Ichikawa says no and tries to fight him off. They clean up after their shift ends, load up their tools, and wave goodbye to their colleagues. Ichikawa stays back for a bit to talk to Kafka about their fight. He apologizes to Kafka and says that he won't disrespect him ever again. This show of character surprises Kafka, and he almost tears up like a baby. But then he remembers that he doesn't cry in front of arrogant pests, or anybody for that matter. So he responds with a generous smile and tells him no worries, it's all good. Just as Ichikawa was about to say something, a giant Kaiju appeared. Luckily, Kafka saves him, but not for long. They both hit the ground. Then as Ichikawa gets back up, he gets smacked right back down. Kafka tells him to call for backup, and he starts running away instantly, almost like a coward. Now Kafka has the honor of soloing the big boss Kaiju, but decides to cower and sprint away as fast as he could. He runs into a tiny alleyway in hopes of escaping the big ugly boy, but is met with a thick glass wall. But no glass wall was going to stop him. He powers right through it. As he does, he gets a flashback. Shortly remembering that girl he dreamt of, hoping he lives to meet her someday. As he snaps back to reality, he realizes the monster has found another route. This time he decides to stand his ground, but gets one tapped right through space. The big monster goes in to finish the kill, but Ichikawa returns to save him with a spade. Unfortunately, it was a light hit which barely impacted the monster. Ichikawa then starts to wet his pants. They both start screaming and making their final prayers just as a tiger comes zooming in to completely obliterate the monster. The Kaiju has a brief moment of epilepsy before going out like a bunch of old fireworks. Ichikawa and Kafka both look around to see who saved them. It was the woman from Kafka's dreams. Kafka faints. The paramedics come to take care of the injured and take them to seek immediate medical attention. At the hospital, Kafka lies awake, wondering what on earth just happened, and how did that woman appear out of nowhere to save him. He makes a promise to himself that he will join Division 3 no matter what it takes. Ichikawa wakes up near him and says, "Thanks for saving me, senpai. I owe you big time." This gasses Kafka up, making him feel proud, but then he sees a little Kaiju and realizes all those things he just said may never happen. The Kaiju enters his mouth and plunges deep inside his throat. It's too late. Kafka is now possessed. He becomes a mutated version of the Kaiju he just ate. Kafka sees his reflection, and so does Ichiko. Then they both start freaking out like a bunch of schoolgirls. Meanwhile, an old perv walks by and sees them. He pulls out his phone to snitch. Back at the FBI headquarters, that woman picks up her phone. It's the old man who snitched. Now she has a job to take the newfound Kaiju out. She wonders how the monster even got there in the first place. Back at the hospital, Kafka is reminiscing of the time he spent with that girl. Mina Shiro briefs her soldiers regarding the missing Kaiju investigation, emphasizing the need for a speedy elimination. After the old man snitched, Kafka scared the Jesus out of him by pulling funny faces. Grandpa has a panic attack and faints. Kafka accidentally destroys half of the hospital, realizing his newfound Kaiju powers. Then he tries to jump out the window but accidentally destroys the whole glass frame. The dynamic duo jump out the hole they made, ready to run like thieves. They both then flee from the hospital, and on the run Kafka realizes he can't fully control his powers. Kafka morphs into a monster and accidentally feasts on a bird. But then he urgently needs the loo, but his Kaiju form isn't letting him hold back, so he bursts out all over the streets. He then has a mental breakdown when Ichiko tells him he now has absolutely no chance of joining the School of Defense. Ichi then reminds him of his crush, and Kafka gets up instantly, remembering that things must be done. All of a sudden, Kafka senses that there's something underground. He was right, a massive beast pops out of nowhere. Mina discusses the Kaiju investigation with her peers, telling them where to patrol. Kafka and Ichiko finally arrive a good distance away from that hospital. Kafka then says he can smell Kaiju. A girl sobs as she stands by her injured mother. She tries lifting the debris but fails miserably. Then her mother screams at her, telling her to run, but the Kaiju was already about to eat her, until something suddenly zapped it out of existence. It was Kafka. He obliterated the soul out of that monster. Kafka then went and asked the girl if she was okay. With an affirmative response, he then helped out the girl's mother. Suddenly, there was an even bigger monster, the size of a colossal titan. Kafka was pooping bricks at this point, but with his new form, he had faith in himself. He charged his fist up, and with one swift blow, he vaporized his ancestor. The power surging through him made everybody shiver. Ichika even wet his pants during that fight. After accomplishing the Saitama-level feat, he went on and apologized to the girl for looking like a freak. He reminded her that the defense forces were on their way. There's no need to worry. The little girl thanks him, and this brings back good memories of him and his girl Mina. Ichiko tells Kafka to get running before the cops find him. Shortly after, Mina makes it to the scene. She investigates the evidence, then inquires the poor little girl. The little girl tells her to not hurt the good Kaiju or else she get karma. Back at the work site, Kafka's peers watch the news and wonder how they couldn't have had found the human-sized Kaiju already. The blind eyewitness testimony tells the news channel that he isn't blind and saw a Kaiju at the hospital. Luckily, no one has found him yet. Kafka's boss talks to his employees about how every year they cheer him up for being a failure, except this time Kafka has passed the exams. Hachigō accepts the envelope on behalf of Kafka. Hachigō goes to meet his boy Kafka, asks how's he been and what he's been up to. Kafka says not much, just killing time, and trying to become a human again. Hachigō gives Kafka his results, and Kafka shows zero enthusiasm. Why should he? He is officially a Super Saiyan at this point. Ichika asks what he'll do now. Kafka says that he'll definitely join the squad. Kafka looks at his crush's image on a giant billboard, and tells himself that he is not going to quit his dreams of joining the squad. While popping open a bottle, he accidentally changes forms. This makes Ichika mad. Ichika tells him to grow up, or else he'll leave him on his own. Lying down on the ground, Kafka thinks about how to get revenge on Ichika, but he was too stupid to think of anything. The next week, the power couple drive 200 miles to the exam hall. They pull up into a gigantic parking lot, and as they park their whip, they meet this annoying little brat. The brat addresses Kafka as an old man, and tells him to move his car to another spot, because 5 is her lucky number. Kafka tells her to go find her mummy because she looked lost. The brat gets angry and shows off her big muscles, then grabs his car, and in one rapid motion, lifts and flicks the car to another location. This display of strength makes the two boys gasp in horror. Meanwhile, their car lay lifeless on the ground. Kafka starts dropping bricks in his pants, wondering who this brat is. The girl says hold up. Is it just me, or do you smell like Kaiju? Ichiko interrupts by asking, "Who are you?" The brat responds her name is Hikaru Shanomiya. Try not to forget it. Ichiko then explains that they work in Kaiju disposal. She asks, what are they doing here? She notices that Kafka has a private suit too, then tells Kafka that she'd be making a fool out of him. The brat heads inside, leaving Ichiko to rage at Kafka for transforming. Two rats trot over and warn them that they heard a loud noise, but the duo assure them that everything's fine. Kafka and Ichiko get ready for the test. Old man Kaf realizes his body has become old. Even though he'd been doing hard physical labor every day, he gets ready for the aptitude test and realizes he needs every point he can achieve to pass. He loads a bit more and considers cheating, but he doesn't give in to his temptations. The brat states that she's already made a fool of him, and it took zero effort. Kafka cries shamefully in front of everyone. He regrets not using his powers to cheat, but Ichiko assures him that he's just gotten a little rusty. Back at the office, an agent gives the examination reports to Mina, who seems unimpressed as usual. He tells her to keep an eye on this year's candidates, especially Haruchi Izuma, Haru Furuhashi, a valedictorian, and a real powerhouse. Self-defense force prodigy, Ali Kaguraji. Kafka realizes it's no wonder that he's failing so badly. Then he promises to kick Kikuru Shanomiya's butt. He attempts to do exactly that, but her bodyguards make him eat dirt. She calls him out on his foolishness for the third time. Kafka snaps back, but simultaneously realizes she's cute and gives up. Vice Captain Hoshina introduces himself and tells everybody that beyond the big door is their final task, which is to track down all the Kaiju and subdue them in combat. Kikuru is listening attentively, knowing this'll be a piece of cake, but Old Man Kaf, on the other hand, was dropping bricks of all kinds of shapes and sizes. He realizes there's no way out of this one, so he calls Ichika a liar upon finding out about their last task. Ichika responds that he had no idea, and that it sucks for him too. Hoshina assures them all that they'll be geared up properly, and not to worry. Everyone tries on their new combat gear, and they're amazed by the technology. The gear contours perfectly to their bodies. It's seemingly far superior to Iron Man's nanotech. It even has a built-in neural network. The examiners then take combat power readings. Rino Ichikawa gets 8%, Haruhichi Uzumo gets 18%, Ale Kagurabi 15%, Baharu Furuhachi 14%, Kikuru Shanomiya gets an insane 46%. The agent states that nobody's getting disqualified, but maybe if they get a 0. Kafka gets a big 0%. Everyone starts mocking him, even saying that he looks like he's taking a dump. The brat, on the other hand, knows that he's capping and really wanted to see what his real level was. With the assessment out of the way, it was time to get started. The captain explains that the test will involve neutralizing multiple targets, 36 Yoju and 1 Hunju, using standard, common loot. He also states that if a life is in danger, the operators will activate a shield in their suit, but this will disqualify them. With the debris stone, the examinees are then set to start their final task. Kikura activates her suit and gets to flying. She starts dropping bodies, left and right. Currently on a Zerg streak, she leaves the guys behind for being too slow. The examiners are speechless. Meanwhile, Oldman and Ichi are busying themselves, panting like dogs. Luckily, Ichika is a renowned motivational speaker. He gets Kafka to move his big butt. The captain also encourages him by reminding him that his crush is watching. With his newfound motivation, he gets up, gives himself a quick pep talk, and opens his mouth to formulate a strategy with Ichika. Realizing that they're being assessed on teamwork and not the number of kills, he runs off to get some assists. With his newly activated power, Ichikawa can barely keep up. Taking notice, he tells Ichika that they'll stop under the bridge, but he had no clue monsters were already occupying that space. Using his work intel, he realized these type of Kaiju need to be targeted in the head area. They are vulnerable to flash grenades, so he zapped one blind, making it scream frantically. Then he told the other recruits to him for the belly. They did exactly that, and thanked Kafka for the recommendation by calling him a Kikuru fanboy. Back at the exam room, Captain is low-key impressed. A mic hard to win Mina. Ichika thanks Kafka for saving him. Kafka says no worries, just don't beat me up like last time. Kafka realizes that now is his chance to redeem himself for all his past sins, and he needs to impress Mina. Unfortunately, he embarrasses himself when he gets thrown across the ground by his enemies, but he doesn't give up. Mina has possessed his mind. He cannot fail. Ichika just stands there hopelessly, watching him shamed. Back at the office, the examiner's fingers are itching to activate the shield barrier, but the captain tells them to hold on. At this point, Kafka can hear Mina whispering in his ears, telling him to grow a pair. He finally finds the courage to get up, but by then, it was too late. The beast Kaiju was about to swallow him whole. Just then, something zapped the monster up. Of course, it was the genius brat. She saves Kafka and makes a fool of him one last time. She then proceeds to tell him that he's like a younger brother, and she won't ever let him die, at least not when she's around. After that, Kafka goes through a mini midlife crisis, does a bit of self-loathing, and then lines himself back into being the motivated individual by remembering his dreams, which is that woman. Through the power of sheer will, Kafka's cries were answered. His power finally rose by an astounding 0.01%. At that very moment, he bet that he made Mina extremely proud. Despite the obvious pain in his leg, he really didn't want to piggyback. He brushed it off with a strained laugh. But Ichika didn't care. He picked him up anyway. Back in the office, the captain was dying of laughter, mocking these two idiots. Kafka, though clearly in pain, he finally declared his intent to continue. Ichika offered to share the burden of Kafka's injury. Kafka requests Ichika use his knowledge of Kaiju to strategize. Ichika grumbled, then agreed to take point while Kafka focused on shooting. As Ichika sped up, Kafka reminded him to prioritize following Kikaru. Kikaru pressed on, ignoring offers of help from Edward and Alphonse. Meanwhile, they battled leftover enemy forces. With a final blast, they emerged victorious, just as Kikaru reached the Honju. Moments later, the announcement boomed. The exam was complete. As they recalled their drones, congratulations were exchanged. Suddenly, the mood darkened. New drones appeared and a frantic voice reported injured teammates. The mission wasn't over. As the dust settled, Kafka and Ichu reflected on the exam. Rumors about Kikaru's prowess were true, even captivating Mina's attention. Despite a grueling exam with no dropouts and minimal injuries, Kikaru undeniably dominated. The vice captain acknowledged her talent, crediting her lineage to director Shinomiya. Everyone agreed Kikaru was a future star of the defense force, a beacon of hope for the nation. Meanwhile, Kikaru reveled in her flawless performance, anticipating another round of gloating at her rival. Despite acknowledging Kikaru's impressive performance, Kafka grumbled about being constantly outmatched. He begrudgingly admitted her skills were the only reason he remained in the exam. Suddenly, Kikaru gets attacked. Nobody had a clue about this newcomer. They remained shrouded in mystery. The situation escalated as a new figure emerged, its skin unlike any Kaiju Kafka had encountered. Each of them questioned its intelligence. Before Kafka could react, a monstrous voice boomed, toying with them. Meanwhile, Kikaru's vitals went haywire. Medical personnel scrambled to identify the cause. New readings emerged. The dead Kaiju was reviving, stronger than before. The situation became dire, a threat so powerful it would normally require a whole company to subdue. Realizing the examinees were the only ones in range, the officials initiated emergency protocols, remote shields, and drone reinforcements. The stakes had never been higher. Despite the captain and another soldier volunteering to intervene, the situation became critical. Evacuation orders were issued for the examinees, but Kikaru refused to abandon the fight. She argued the revived Kaiju posed a grave threat and that someone had to confront it. Her vitals stabilized with the Kaiju muscle fibers, and her determination remained fierce. Fueling her competitive spirit and unwavering sense of duty, she declared her refusal to flee or be imperfect. The monstrous laughter echoed as Kikaru pushed herself to her feet. A voice, filled with awe, congratulated her on her performance. Kikaru, fueled by flashbacks, learned she had achieved the highest score. Overjoyed greetings erupted from her father and younger sister, Risa. Kikaru, steely-eyed, acknowledged her top score. It was merely a stepping stone. A stern voice, laced with reverence, reminded her that dwelling on this victory would only hinder her future. Perfection remained her relentless pursuit for the nation and for her mother's memory. Meanwhile, a dire situation unfolded elsewhere. A monstrous roar echoed as the Kaiju seemingly regenerated. and prepared a devastating attack. Soldiers ushered civilians towards safety, urging them to reach the emergency shelter. Relief washed over them at the sight of Japan's finest approaching. Back on the battlefield, as the mighty Kaiju unleashes mayhem, Kafka has no choice but to transform. He apologizes to Kikuro just before he does. Amidst the chaos, a soldier realized with horror that the supposedly injured Kikuru was being targeted by the Kaiju. But luckily Kafka is with her, in his Super Saiyan form, ready to send that thing back to Cloud 9. After doing just that, he helps the rest of the crew, then returns back to Kikuro to explain everything, but first saves her from a surprise flank attack. All of a sudden, they hear another roar. This time it's coming from an even fiercer foe, though it looked like the same Kaiju. Again, Kafka smacks the creepers out of the Kaiju so he can get back to flirting with Kikuro. Kikuro scolded Kafka, learning of his mid-battle transformation. Kafka weakly defended himself, explaining he had no choice against the Kaiju rats. Relief flooded the scene as Hachigō and Hoshina arrived to find the Kaiju vanquished. But amidst the crater, something startled the captain. At the operation room, relief washed over the staff as news arrived Hikuru, Reno, and Kafka, the missing examinees, had been found. However, concern lingered. Kafka was injured far more severely than expected, and the Kaiju's sudden appearance and blast zone were shrouded in mystery. Captain Oshido ordered an investigation and disposal team, his mind flashing back to a similar incident 3 months prior. Meanwhile, Ichigo received positive news. Kafka's injuries were less serious than anticipated. In the hospital, news of Kikuru's advanced treatment fueled Ichigo's jealousy. Despite her injuries, Ichigo couldn't help but admire Kikuru's determination. Reflecting on the battle, Ichigo realized the thrill of the chase had overshadowed the bigger picture. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Captain Ashiro stood there, thanking Ichigo for saving Kikuru. As everyone chose at the hospital, the mysterious Kaiju was later shown to be watching the news on his phone whilst taking a dump. He then joins his work crew to go back undercover. The scene shifts to two people congratulating each other on becoming officers. Woolhair and his duo discuss why they couldn't come first. They are then interrupted by Kikuru's grand entrance. Iharu bumps into Ichikawa and introduces himself. Shortly after, the ceremony begins. Shanomiya is announced as one of the incoming officers. All 27 new officers are sworn in and promise to give their lives for the cause. Mina mentions that Kikuru averted a catastrophe and prevented loss of lives after the exam, and thanks her. Kikuru thinks the thanks are meant for Kafka, and wonders why Kafka is not there to hear the gratitude. She felt embarrassed and humiliated. Old man Kafka turns up late. Mina announces Kafka's scores, adding that he got the lowest score ever on the suit aptitude test. However, the captain argues that Kafka's knowledge of the Kaiju's weaknesses and his strategic thinking during the fight make up for his low scores. Plus, he's funny as hell. The captain announces that Kafka will be enrolled as a cadet. Kafka's friends were all surprised. Captain Ashido thanks the new recruits and acknowledges the increasing number and strength of Kaiju. She talks about the increasing difficulty of the Defense Force's job, mentioning that Kaiju are coming back to life, and that new recruits may not survive their first mission. Captain Ashido asks the new recruits to trust her and fight for her. Kafka interrupts Captain Ashido and embarrasses himself. Kafka is reprimanded for insubordination and ordered to do 100 push-ups. The captain bursts out laughing, stating that she should have given him more than 100. The captain talks about Kafka fainting during the exam at the same time the 9.8 fortitude signal appeared. He says there is something off about Kafka and that he'll be keeping a close eye on him. Kikuro approaches Kafka and tells him to come talk in private. The other recruits think she's asking Kafka out on a date. She confronts Kafka about eating a Kaiju and suggests it is disgusting. Kafka defends himself, saying he didn't do it on purpose, and considers telling the Defense Force everything. She tells Kafka that revealing he is a Kaiju user would be a bad idea, that the Defense Force would kill him or experiment on him. She acknowledges that Kafka saved her life and agrees to keep his secret. The scene switches to a training exercise. We see Ichikawa activating his aimbot and deleting everything. The captain compliments him. E1 challenges Ichikawa to a competition and they both complete a firing exercise. E1 boasts about whipping his butt even though he had better cheats. Shinomiya the brat completes the exercise with a much higher score than both of them. Luke gets discouraged and says he feels like a bot. Yellowhead tells Blue Hair he should be worried about him. Kafka celebrates finally getting a 1% on his combat power test. Vice Captain Hoshida acknowledges Kafka's improvement but warns him he needs to improve more or risk being kicked from the program. The trainees are told to run 10 miles around the perimeter. They almost got themselves 5 extra. The trainees complain about the difficulty of the workout. E1 argues with Ichikawa about his lack of muscle mass. Ichika tells him to quit juicing. Kafka flexes his blonde's age physique, but then he runs out of air and accidentally exposes his beer belly. Everybody laughs at him. Suddenly, everyone stops as Yellowhead enters the bathhouse. Mina approaches the other trainees and asks if they have recovered from their injuries. Kikura tells her that she has a question about her workout routine. This results in Mina inviting her to train with her. Yellowhead asks the trainees why they decided to join the defense force. The trainees all say that they admire Captain Mina. Kafka adds that they were childhood friends and apparently made a promise to join the defense force together. Then he realizes he should have lied. Meanwhile, Kikura goes snooping around and asks her maid why the boys are all laying on the ground. Later on, the trainees all go do some exercises to level up their newbie skills. Kafka is training double time to make up for his stupidity. The captain busts him and tells him that they spy on all the trainees, even when they're at the bathhouse. The captain thinks Kafka is after his job as vice captain, so he tells that he will need to fight for it. He also warns him about getting too attached to people in this business. Later that night, an alarm wakes everyone up. Subtly, Kafka was still awake, so now he has to fight with 0 sleep. The captain tells him, "It's go time." Mona asks for a situation report and is informed that the evacuation of the surrounding area around Sagamihara have begun. An emergency Kaiju alert is announced for the people of Sagamihara. People are instructed to evacuate. The news report discusses the lack of defense forces present and shows the army setting up an artillery command with an observation post. They then talk about the type of Kaiju, a Honju that recently emerged and is now reproducing. They ask about the status of the emergency backpack and discuss how the Honju burrowed underground, then re-emerged, accompanied by a large number of Yoju. They then ask about the plan to neutralize the Honju. Mina responds, "We'll target it with a sniper shot and set up a perimeter to kill any Yoju that spawn from it." The scene shifts to Kafka and his team, where the captain gives a pep talk before their first mission. Kafka gets nervous and throws up. The scene shifts again to Kafka and his team arriving at the neutralization area. They are briefed on their mission. Their job is to kill any Yoju that escapes the designated area to minimize collateral damage from the larger Honju Kaiju. The commander gives a pep talk and tells the new recruits to forget about their training scores and to show what they did. He then proceeds to tell them not to let him down and to have fun. The JSDS Artillery Regiment reports in and says they are ready to begin. The captain gives the order to fire and to drive the Honju toward a specific sector. Kafka tells himself that this is his chance to prove he can do the job. His superior tells him that if he keeps improving at this rate he will get kicked out because he only has 3 months to shape up. Even though he feels pressure, he's also excited about his first mission. Him and his teammates are ordered to move out. Meanwhile, the JSDF Artillery Regiment open fire on the Honju to drive it towards a specific sector. Kafka's superiors tell them it's time for their big debut and to impress them. Kafka and his team engage with the Yoju. He notices that he is calmer than he was during the exam, and the suit is actually helping him this time. Kafka feels a sense of combat power and is told by a superior to stay at the back of the formation because they are babysitting the new recruits. The superior tells them to hang back and play it safe until they hear something from the front line. Kafka agrees to hang back, but asks for a cookie and glass of milk in return. Chikara uses a new tactic to defeat a Yoju by using freeze rounds. An admiral is watching Kafka and his team, so his heart rate increases rapidly. The admiral tells Chikara to finish the job. Kikuro congratulates Kafka on his work, but Kafka clarifies that it was her who carried everyone. Kikuro explains that she switched to freeze rounds and believes they are more effective. She says that she wants to get stronger so Kafka doesn't have to transform. Ichikawa is surprised by how quick Miyoju are and wonders when they started building rockets. Ichika and Ihara discuss how well the new recruits are doing and wonder how their combat power is above average. They mention that the vice captain noticed that the new recruits are pushing themselves to keep up with the top guns. The captain also notices the group's average combat power is higher than usual. The soldiers continue to debate who's performing well, while they relax at the back. One sector is reported clear. Soldiers discuss how they deserve a pay rise. Unfortunately, they are forced to do overtime, so they go during the front lines. Kafka feels useless because he is being told to hang back and wait, but he decides to use his weapons despite being told to wait. Kafka examines a Yoju and realizes he can use his knowledge to help. Kafka discovers the weak points of the Yoju and that they have reproductive organs that need to be destroyed to prevent them from spawning more. He radios this information to his superiors. Kafka's superiors are impressed and relay the information to all officers. They acknowledge that Kafka's knowledge from his old job was helpful. Kafka feels that he is contributing to the mission and wants to do more to help. Orders are given for all defense force platoons to withdraw because the Hanju has reached its destination. The JSDF focuses fire on the Hanju's legs to try to pin it down for as long as possible. They confirm there are no other targets in the area and Mina may prepare to fire. Mina tells Kafka that this is how to unleash 96% of the suit's combat power. Mina fires another round and the Hanju starts to collapse. She fires one last round for assurance to make sure the Hanju has taken critical damage and stops moving. The JSDS observes that the Hanju is no longer moving and its vitals have disappeared. Kafka is impressed by Mina's godly strength. Captain tells Kafka that he needs to be as strong as Mina to be by her side. Kafka reveals that he isn't strong with guns but is a descendant of Kaiju hunters and very skilled with swords like Samurai Champloo. A new enemy appears behind Captain, who then reveals that he is also from a long line of Kaiju hunters and skilled with swords. Captain obliterates the enemy with his ninja skills and destroys the Hanju's eggs. But this isn't enough. The real threat is the swarm of Yoju inside the Hanju's body. The Yoju emerge from the Hanju and head towards the JSDF. The JSDF prepares to fight the Yoju. As the Yoju infiltrate the JBF camp, the new recruits are struggling to keep up with the fighting. A monster sleeper arrives on the theme, surprised to learn that the JDS has defeated the Hanju and knows about the reproductive organs. They wonder if someone in the JDF knows something that they shouldn't. Someone is sus.